following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
I am back, and you are comfortably zoned with me, the Zig Zag Man, in Alameda, California, right across the bay from San Francisco, and across the moat from Oakland at the 420 studio, down by the lagoon, as Archie Bunker would say, were he here. Love being in Northern California, and I love doing this podcast because it gives me a chance to talk to some of the most interesting people in the world. Today is no exception. I have a real Renaissance man. He's an author, an historian, a poet, a lyricist, a traveler, a thinker, a dreamer, member of the World Party. Let me introduce to these airwaves for the first time, Matthew DiBiase. Did I get the pronunciation right, Matthew?
You were beautiful, Ralph. Beautiful.
I'm as good as I get, and that's the good news and the bad news all wrapped into one. You are indeed, Matthew, a Renaissance man. You're an author, first and foremost. I'd like to get to know you a little bit before we talk about what you've written and what you've done. What did you read as a very young person that shaped your life?
Well, I was reading sports books at a very early age, like around elementary school. I always had a love of reading. My mother was very much into reading. She was into like sci-fi books and historical novels and all of that. I was like, when I was in elementary school, I was reading like Charlotte's Web, like the Little Secret Hideout, Alvin Fernald books and all of that. So it gave me like a love of reading and an adventure and things of that nature. And then I was getting into sports history books. I was like, like Sandy Koufax, Bart Starr, highlights of various World Series, like, this 31 World Series, 1963 World Series, and things like that. So in a sense, by the age of 10, I had a love of sports history, and I mean, by the time I finished elementary school, I could recite all the World Series winners from 1903 up to 1973. Seriously, wow. I could do that. I mean, I could retain these things, and so I always loved sports history. I couldn't play sports worth a lick. I only had like one season of Little League ball, and let me put it this way: it was a rather traumatic experience for me. So
life is a traumatic experience. Little League just gets you used to it, is all.
Yeah, I know. But let's just say I could think it and enjoy the history of it, but playing it, no, couldn't do it. I was just too clumsy, too ham-fisted, and I was never the athletic type. I was always more the historical type and all that. I could appreciate the sports history, and my father liked watching sports documentaries on TV and all that. And so, I was always absorbing sports history in various forms, watching games and also retrospectives and all of that, and enjoying it immensely. And
did your father pass on the passion to you about sports?
Oh, yes. He loved baseball, loved football. And he himself was not particularly athletic. He was enthusiastic, but not athletic. I mean, and all that. He was a cement mason. I'm half Italian. My father was pure Italian. He was West Philly Italian. His parents came over on the boat. His mother came in 1913. My father came in 1920. But on my mother's side, I'm very old Southern, but not exactly prosperous Southern. So in a sense, I'm half Italian and I'm half Johnny Reb.
Ah,
and my mother, yeah.
That's an interesting combination.
Yeah,
but
my mother's Southern. Yeah, go ahead, Rob. Sorry.
I was just trying to put it together in my head what you like. Where did you grow up?
Yeah, I mean, I just reading. I was constantly reading. I was kind of just basically alone, didn't have many friends, so basically books became my friends. And I'm now absorbing all of this, not just sports history, but also world history, military history, biographies, and all that. I mean, by the time I was in my senior year in high school, I knew I never wanted to become a teacher. I saw too many bad teachers in my school system. What I wanted to do was work in a museum. And when I started my college years in 1982, I devoted myself to getting my major was in history, and in 86 I got my bachelor's in world history, went immediately into graduate school to do museum studies, finished my schooling in 89 and got my master's degree in 91. And 3 months after I got my master's degree, I got my present job at the National Archives at Philadelphia. You know, so I've been working.
So your dream came true, really?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been working at the National Archives at Philadelphia since 1991. I've become old and gray, and service there, and hope always to maintain it that way. You know, I tend to keep right on going as long as I'm physically and mentally capable. But I've never lost.
Are you from Philadelphia?
No, I was born and raised in South Jersey, but I had to move to Northeast Philadelphia in 2012 due to work commitments and all of that. But mostly my lineage is South Jersey all the way.
Okay, who'd you grow up following as a kid in sports?
My first sports idol was Hank Aaron. I mean, 1973, he was chasing the babe, and I was rooting for him all the way. You know, he fell just one home run short at the end of 73, and of course, right at the start of the 74 season, there on national TV, I watched him stroke that 715th home run. He's always been one of my favorite baseball players of all time. I've always respected him enormously. He was like one of my favorite baseball players. Let's see, like football. I didn't have really a specific football player in mind.
You mentioned Bart Starr a few moments ago.
Yeah, as a kid, but I was never like a heavy Packer fan. I mean, my father and I, we suffered with the Philadelphia Eagles, but no one specific football player ever really stood out. I didn't idolize any one specific football player. Now, in basketball, it was Dr. J, Julius Erving. I mean, they could talk about Michael Jordan and LeBron James and Kevin Durant all they want, but to me, my main squeeze was Dr. J, man. No other basketball player excited me so much as Dr. J. He really, he'll always be my basketball idol. And in hockey, it was
in my mind is that picture of him starting. What was it? The top of the key, I think it was.
Yeah.
Coming in for this skywalking dunk, which in those days wasn't as commonplace as is today.
Yeah, I mean, when that ABA All-Star Weekend, the trick was, could he do it from the foul line? You know, go airborne from the foul line and dunk it in, and he proved it. To me, one of my favorite sports photographs is the Sports Illustrated we got, like the last ABA championship finals. There's this. It was the cover photograph for the story. There's on the left-hand side is the rim. On the right-hand side is a basketball, and there's a hand attached to that basketball, and it's Dr. J's hand. He is above the rim, and he's about ready to jam it in when he's with the New York Nets. I mean, that is the most awesome, powerful photograph I've ever seen, and it captures the power and the glory of Julius Erving, in my view.
I will look for that. Is that could that be found on Google? Just out of curiosity.
You go to SI Vault and go to 1976 because that was the last ABA Finals, and I forget, was that May or June? You'll probably get that article, okay, in Sports Illustrated because it is an awesome photograph. So it's either May or June of '76 because it was a Sports Illustrated article on the ABA Finals. I don't know if they were ended or they had yet, and I'll go look for it and I'll email you the link, okay, so you can get that article, okay?
Oh, I
love
appreciate
that photograph,
Matthew, because I am a dinosaur on this thing. I just found out, speaking of being a dinosaur, there's a difference between your spam mail and your inbox. I had no idea. That's how much of a computer dinosaur I am. So thank you for helping me. Leads me to my question. You mentioned Sports Illustrated. What were the periodicals that you read when you were a kid?
Mostly it was Time magazine. We were always regular subscribers to Time, though after I moved away, I never did Time magazine by my own. We used to do Sports Illustrated, but But me, when I moved away when 1992, got a place of my own, I never was really subscribing to magazines. Now, in the 80s, I was on a major boxing kick, and I was getting Ring magazine there because from like 86 to like 95, I was really into boxing in a super serious way. I mean, I was keeping my own statistics and all that. I had half a mind of like doing a reference book on boxing history, but it never ever came off. And that's all. And I never followed through on it. But I mean, starting in the mid '80s, I was.
What was the name of the man who published Ring magazine? I forget, but
Matt Fleischer, the dean of all boxing writers. I mean, he created Ring. I mean, he was there from like the absolute beginning, from like was it 1910 or something like that until I forget when he died. Was it 60s or 70s like that? But he knew them all, from Jack Johnson all the way up to Ali. I mean, he was literally the dean of all boxing writers. The greatest of his time.
I wonder if those magazines were ever put in a book. If one could go to the library or buy a book that contains the content of those magazines.
If I'm not mistaken, the International Boxing Hall of Fame in Canastota, New York, has all the back issues of Ring magazine, and I do believe they're digitized now. I think if you subscribe to Ring magazine, I think you could go back and actually get all the digital things. I'm almost sure of it. I'm not a subscriber now, but I think I saw somewhere that they are digitized. I think if you became a subscriber, you could probably access that digital archive of Ring magazine, if I'm not mistaken. But I do know that the Boxing Hall of Fame at Canastota does have in its archives all those issues of Ring magazine. I think they were donated, if I'm not mistaken. I've never been to the Boxing Hall of Fame at Canastota, but I want to one day. I want to in the worst way. I've been to Cooperstown. I've done that. I've been there. That was a thrill.
Well, I would like to have you as a guest on this show with Jack O'Halloran, who is a regular on my network and is a Renaissance man himself. He's former heavyweight contender, fought Norton, fought Foreman, and
wow.
You'd be a great guest with him, and we'll set that up sometime.
Oh, that would be a great honor. Yeah. I mean, my strength was like 86 to 94. I was a major Mike Tyson fan in the worst way before he went to prison. I was really heavily. He was like my favorite of all time. I mean, I loved Ali. I was still a kid when Ali was at the tail end of his career. I followed Larry Holmes, but it was during the Mike Tyson era that I was really, really heavily into it in a major league way.
Well, he did some damage, and he was quite a character. Let's say. Do you know anything about Mike Tyson that we don't know, me, my audience, that we'd be interested in? What about Mike Tyson do you know?
One thing that always amazed me about Tyson was not only was he, at the time when he won the title in '86, the youngest man ever to win a heavyweight title. It was just strictly the WBC version of the title at the time. But the thing about Tyson was, at a very early age, he was a Major League Boxing historian because one of his co-managers was the late, was it Jimmy Jacobs, who he and Bill Caden had one of the greatest archives of boxing matches in all of sports history. I mean, they had stuff going back to like the 19th century, early 20th century, and it was just amazing. And Tyson used to watch those old films, those old fighters like Battling Nelson, Joe Gans, Ad Walgast, Abe Attell, Gentleman Jim Corbett, Jim Jeffries, and I mean, real old guys at the turn of the century, 1900s, 1910s, 20s, like that. I mean, and
guys that box without gloves.
Yeah, well, last bare knuckle thing was 1889, and Marcus of Queensberry rules began in 1892. But with Tyson, he knew his boxing history. I mean, he liked watching the old fighters. In fact, in some of his fights, when he would score a knockout, he would imitate the poses of some of those old fighters. I remember reading a Sports Illustrated article when I forget, was it Tony Tubbs or was it Holmes? He imitated a pose from when Battling Nelson knocked out Joe Gans in a 1908 or 1909 bout. He imitated the way he stood over Gans in a way. I mean, that is serious devotion to history in a way. And me as a sports historian in my own right, I got a kick out of that. I mean, I like that in a sense, because if I had been an athlete, I probably would have been imitative as well in a sense. You know, I probably would have done the same thing, imitate some of the old greats in a sense.
Absolutely. Which sport, if you had to pick one and couldn't have another one in your life, which sport would it be?
Ooh, boy. Wow. Jeez. Oh, man. Right now I'm heavily into college football because my third book, which will be released on Labor Day weekend, is about the 50 greatest college football coaches. I think right now I'm really into college football in a sense, you know, following it and getting devoted to it in a sense. So right now I think, college football.
Good answer. Tell us about the book and tell us about what motivated you to pick the subject. Okay.
This will be my third book. My first book, Bench Bosses, the NHL's Coaching Elite, came out in 2015. My second book, The Art of the Dealers, the NHL's Greatest General Managers, came out November 2017. My third book, which will be titled Lords of the Gridiron, College Football's Greatest Coaches, will be released Labor Day weekend. It will be up on Amazon. In that book, I identified the 50 greatest college football coaches of all time using a rating system I personally devised. It's kind of something out of like a Bill James type concept. I created a four-tiered rating system using four standards, and I ran all the Division 1A college football coaches with a minimum of 10 seasons of coaching experience at the Division 1A level through my system from like the 1890s all the way up to the present time. I have a pool of 416 coaches, and after I ran them all through, I used a composite rating system, and when my book comes out, it will identify the 50 greatest of all time as determined by my rating system. And it basically, if you go through all the college coaching greats like Bryant, Paterno, Bud Wilkinson, Woody Hayes, they're in there. But the question is, where do they rank in relation to one another? And that's going to be the great mystery. And when it all comes out on Labor Day weekend, everyone will know. Because as far as I know, no one has ever done a book like this before. Yes, there have been bios and on the great college football coaches, and some of the coaches have written their own memoirs and all of that. But no one, as far as I know, has ever written a book where someone actually tried to rate them, like Bill James or someone like that,
right,
using a system and try to put how do they all rate with one another? Who's on top? Who's in the top 10? Who's on the bottom rung here? Who's among the 50 and who is not amongst the top 50? And that's what my book does. And actually, that's what my first two books did as well, because with my hockey coaches book, my first book, Bench Bosses, no one had ever done that before. Yes, there were bios on hockey coaches, but no one had ever attempted to rate and rank the great NHL coaches using a system. Mine was the first. And with my
how does Emile Francis rank in your hockey coach book?
Let's see.
Not specifically, but is he up there? He was the coach of my boyhood.
I think kind of on the bottom, I think in the 40s range. Let's see, right now, amongst the general managers, because he's also in my general manager's book, I have Emile Francis at the 48th spot right now. Now in my book, I forget, let me check the table of contents. He may have been a little higher. Yeah, he was 47th, but after last season, he's moved down a notch to 48th, because I'm always updating, not the book, but also just always my calculations and all that, on a season-by-season basis. But
have you ever been called an idiot savant?
3-year-old.
Have you ever been called an idiot savant? I say that as a compliment.
No, but I've been called a lot worse when I was a child. I was called and treated a lot worse in a way. So.
Wow, yeah. You have a mind. You're right up there with folks like Alan Blumkin, who has an encyclopedic mind for this. You're a Rain Man. I got to tell you.
Well, I'm not a card counter though, and I'm no card counter, Ralph.
No, stay out of trouble with that.
No, only fools gamble.
Yes. Except if you're gambling on fools, that's generally a sure thing.
That's right.
So.
That's right.
All right. What is writing like for you? Do you sit down and at a specific time, say from 9 to 5, and say, I'm going to write this time? Or do you write when the spirit hits you? Do you keep journals? What's that about?
No, there is a discipline involved. I'm not a diarist, though. One time in the year 2000, I did keep a diary of that specific year because my mother suggested it. Because hey, it's not often you get to live through a millennial year and all that. So she told me to keep a diary, and I did. So that's the only time in my life I ever kept a diary and all that. It is a specific discipline. When I was writing my college football book, every Sunday I would travel to South Jersey and go to a Starbucks using their Wi-Fi system, and then spend 2 hours, just writing about 2 or 3 pages of text for the book, and then for the rest of the days I might edit, and fill in the holes and all that. But right now I'm in the editing process of my college football book, so every day I'm always editing, polishing, revising, doing minute corrections, dotting the I's and crossing the T's and all of that. So I'm always doing something. But basically Sunday's my big writing day. That's when I really go to town and write something really big and all that. When I started writing when I was 17 years old, it wasn't prose. It was just poetry, song lyrics. You talk about it, to many ways, writing is like therapy. When I was in school, it was very hard for me, and I was really going through a hard emotional time. And basically, writing saved me from going mad. It saved me from committing crimes. It saved me from going down a bad road and doing bad things, like drinking or drugging, or doing stupid stuff or something like that. It saved my life. It allowed me to vent my pain and my anguish, because I had a lot of pain and anguish when I was a kid. And it was a way to express my angst and the pain and the suffering that I had deep inside of me. And through college, I began developing my lyric writing, my song lyric writing. And it got better and better and better. But I didn't start getting into prose till in the late 80s, when I became an op-ed columnist at my college newspaper. And that was a very good exercise with me, because every week I would just do an op-ed column. Sometimes it would be politics. Sometimes it would be a think piece or social commentary. Sometimes I'd write about sports. But, on a weekly basis, when I was in semesters, I would do this thing. I would write anything I wanted. And it was a very good experience. I mean, I showed I could write prose. And after I finished my college experience, from time to time I would submit, guest pieces to certain local area newspapers. Everything except the Philadelphia Inquirer. They never ever accepted me, but on the Camden Courier-Post or the Burlington County Times, they would do some of my pieces, and I still got the clippings and all that. Then around 2010, I joined Inside Hockey Magazine and was writing columns for them, and I was doing a series, and it basically evolved into a book, which became my first book, Bench Bosses. And then same thing with my second book, The Art of the Dealers. I was writing a series of columns on gay general managers, and that evolved in my second book as well. And right now with my college football book, now that my book career has gotten launched, I'm just going right into book writing all the time. I haven't written a song or a poem in a long, long while. It's like if I'm writing poetry, I'm not writing prose. But if I'm writing prose, I'm not really writing poetry or song lyrics. It's either one or the other. Very seldom do I do both.
Gotcha. After this book, what is your next project?
Oh, I'm already doing preliminary work on on pro football, the 50 greatest pro football coaches of all time, and that will be called Lords of the Gridiron Part 2, Pro Football's Greatest Coaches. And if all goes according to plan, and if I don't get thrown underneath a bus, that book will come out in September 2022.
Wow. You are an accomplished person for a young fella, let me tell you. It's going great guns.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I've enjoyed this, and what I'd like to know, two things. Did you have fun? And would you come back?
Yeah. I mean, if you ever get that guy O'Halloran or, heck, and it's not just sports. I can do politics too, man. I mean, you Ralph, you've seen my things on Facebook,
we talk on Facebook all the time. We have pretty much like political sense. Let's put it that way.
Oh yes, we are muy simpatico, my friend, muy simpatico.
And which makes it a pleasure, because some people just like to argue for argument's sake. The way I look at it with politics, there really isn't an argument. I can't believe that people don't agree with me. How about that?
Well, in some senses, I'm saddened, but some parts of me are not surprised as well. I mean, if you look at the forces of history, like I said before, I got my bachelor's in world history, but also my major's in American history, at Rutgers University here. And I've always been following politics ever since I was a kid. I'm an active voter. I'm not exactly the one to go knock out on doors and solicit, for candidates or anything like that. I'm not that as super active and all that, but I am a concerned citizen. And we are in a dangerous time in this country. And freedoms, civil liberties, civil rights, the Constitution itself, I feel we are at threat here. And
freedom of press, it all starts, you can go back, you're a history major, it all started in pre-Nazi Germany with them coming down on the press. And that's where it starts. The outrageous threats to newsrooms, to individuals, that scares the hell out of me. They already had bomb threats at CNN. I'm sitting watching live, and these guys are going outside, which, incidentally, anybody listening out there, if you're threatened, you don't want to go outside where you become a target. You want to stay inside and get information. But that's another thing. We're all at peril, and if they start taking away the press, we are messed up, because they could bring the tanks down the middle of Broadway, and we'd have no way of knowing what's going on.
It's not just freedom of the press as well. It's also freedom of speech, the right to protest. That is, there are threats to that as well. I mean, when you see people going out in the streets and demonstrating against the present administration, you're seeing these people doing counter demonstrations and trying to intimidate and harass those, exercising their right to protest. You're seeing this intimidation here. And also like using the courts to intimidate, social protest groups, trying to, drain their financial resources, their legal intimidation, also business and economic intimidation as well. I mean, right now the Bill of Rights, it is being under attack here, and we are going down a dark path, and I worry about us becoming like a corporate fascist state. In that sense, I worry about that. The term I use is corporate fascism, not basically an ideological fascism, but the fascism of big money, destroying the freedom of speech, destroying the freedom of choice, basically programming. It's like that old movie Rollerball with James Caan. Ralph, did you ever see that? The original Rollerball with James Caan? I don't think I did. It's one of my favorite sci-fi films. It came out in the mid-'70s. It's like a little cult classic. It's called Rollerball. They actually made a lousy sequel to it, which I didn't see, but the original one is the superior one. It's starring the actor James Caan. It's a futuristic thing about where there are no countries anymore. Basically, what you have is total corporate monopolization of all natural resources. Like Houston, Texas has commandeered all the world's oil. Geneva, Switzerland has commandeered all the world's banks. Tokyo, Japan commandeered all the world's IT industry, and so on and so forth all down the line. And what you have is basically there is no paper money anymore. It's all cards. It's all electronic. Everything is reduced. There's just total monopolization of food, everything, and even women are reduced to a mere commodity to be traded around ruthlessly. I mean, the character Jonathan E., played by James Caan, he loses his wife because a corporate exec fancied her and basically took her away without her permission or even James Caan's permission and all that. I mean, yeah, you're seeing that right now. Women are reduced to mere commodities and treated like mere commodities. Total dehumanization of the American woman. And basically what they use, these corporate monopolists do is use this sport called rollerball that mixes roller derby, pro wrestling, football, boxing, and all that into a blood sport to satiate the masses.
Well,
you got to see it. I mean, you see it, it hits too close to home.
You've sold me on it, and I'm looking at Netflix right now trying to pick it up.
Rollerball, 1970-something or another. Very old, James Caan.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Before we go, I want you to tell me two things. Did you have fun, and will you come back?
Yes.
All right, then we got waylaid. You will come back because there's so much about you to talk about. And I'm going to get my buddy Jack O'Halloran on with you. And I also want you to talk to Billy Cashadas. Do you know him?
Is he an author? I think is it K-A-S-H-A-T?
Yes, he has a podcast on this network, on my network, and I'd like him to interview you, and you interview him on his show, which is Philadelphia Baseball, Past, Present, and Personal.
Ooh.
And it's on this network. I'll send you a link, and I'll get you guys together. It'd be terrific.
Don't laugh. I want to do a baseball book. After I do my pro football book in 2022, next thing I want to do is a Major League Baseball book, which should come out in 2026. You see, I'm always pegging my books to anniversaries. Like my hockey GM book, my general manager book, that came out in the centennial of the NHL. My college football book, this year is the 150th anniversary of the very first college football game in America, so it's pegged to that.
Right.
And then in 2022 will be the 100th anniversary of the NFL, and then in 2026 will be the 150th anniversary of Major League Baseball when the National League was formed.
Wow. You've got a terrific mind, let me tell you, Matthew.
Thank you, Ralph.
You'll come back. You've agreed to that, and I'm going to end the program the way I generally do. I'm going to implore you and everybody listening to keep your dreams wet, keep your humor dry, and keep your children off the laps of clerics that wear dresses. And with that, I will say I'll be back at you before you know it, and thank you, my friend. Hope this is the start of you becoming part of the network. And thank you for listening, everybody.
Thank you, Ralph. Thank you.
The proceeding was a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production. Thank you for listening.